Good morning, everyone, and happy Easter. It's been a good week for the Askew family. Our daughter Avery and her husband Cole welcomed young Gray Wallace Massey into the world on Thursday. It's our third grandchild and the first boy. Because of Avery's preeclampsia, it was a very difficult and in many ways frightening week for all of us. But we were blessed by the compassion and the expertise of the team at UT Medical Center. And on Thursday night, 5 weeks ahead of schedule at 10:41, a healthy baby boy made his appearance. And a healthy mom and an awestruck dad breathed a sigh of relief, as did we all. It was a good week. I thought of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, many times as I prayed throughout the week and considered how Christ had worked through so many of you to shepherd us through this ordeal. Robin and I and our whole family are very grateful for all the prayers. For the past 3 weeks of the Easter season, the clergy has flipped the tables, so to speak, asking you to reflect on the gospel lessons and, in essence, write the sermons we would deliver on Sunday mornings. We've all been struck repeatedly by the depth of your responses and the rich and personal ways in which you have engaged the Scriptures. And this week was no exception, as together we considered the passage from the Gospel of John in which Jesus describes himself as the Good Shepherd. For the next few minutes, I'm going to let your words preach for themselves. One of you said, "I love this passage and the tenderness behind it. It's so encouraging that in a world where we see so many people struggling to be loved, our Good Shepherd loves us just as we are." Another said, "This passage tells me that when we listen to the voice of Jesus, we will never be led astray from the path we should walk. It also makes me know that I am eternally secure in his arms, and I am fully accepted by the Good Shepherd." And another, "Jesus has been the Good Shepherd through difficult times and good times in my life. He has shut doors that needed to be shut, even when it was incredibly painful. And he opened doors that I could never have opened alone." One of you shared the feminine side of Jesus, the Good Shepherd. I always see the Good Shepherd as a mother. In all walks of life and not limited to humans, moms are unconditionally protective of their children. They are the ones who stand up for their children, but can also be the ones that are hardest on them. When it comes to motherly love, high expectations come with the territory. Like the Good Shepherd, moms can have those expectations because there's no limit to what they will do for their children. For some of you, this week's gospel reminded you of times when you were shepherded into a whole new way of seeing the world. God has guided me throughout the course of my career. And one of the more important lessons I learned when I was in Philadelphia. I traveled there a fair amount and would drive through some really rough neighborhoods to get back to my hotel, which was downtown. Neighborhoods where I hesitated to stop at stop signs for fear that my car might get graffitied. One day I was deep in thought, worrying about some things that awaited for me back home, and then I stopped and looked around and thought to myself, would I trade what I'm worrying about for the things these people have to worry about every day? The answer was clear, and it changed my perspective on life. Many of you cited loved ones as those through whom Christ had worked and how they had inspired you to love more deeply. I have learned in my many years that even if I should die today, God gave me life for a purpose. He blessed me with loving, kind grandparents and parents and shepherded me through my early life, and my wonderful husband is shepherding me still. My prayer is to share the love I have been given and to serve Jesus in any way I can. A number of you saw the passage as a challenge for us to become good shepherds for others. To me, this passage speaks to the heart of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Love. Not just for those I find it easy to love, but for those outside my comfort zone. It speaks to the importance of putting feet to my faith, from a simple act that might make someone's day a little brighter, to sacrificing myself for the good of someone else, to literally putting my life on the line. Putting feet to my faith. Boy, that'll preach every day, won't it? And I was especially touched by how beautifully a couple of you described the many shepherds who had touched your lives, especially in your darkest moments. I think of times when I have been lost emotionally and spiritually, and so far in the depths of the dark forest with one of my legs hung up in a vine that I just gave up. And yet God sent wonderful shepherds to me, psychiatrists and priests and friends and family with clippers and flashlights and water who rescued me from the forest and walked me back to health. Or this: only 3 people at St. John's know about my struggles with depression. Sometimes I can go into dark places for months and I feel a need to hide it from everyone. But my husband promised me I could trust one couple in the church, and he was right. They were my shepherds, and I am grateful that I trusted them to walk with me during my dark times. Each of these responses and so many more we received this week are sermons in themselves. And I thank you for your responses. But I couldn't pass the opportunity to share with you one particularly thought-provoking response that came from one of our parishioners who is joining us remotely today. He said, "I have to confess that although shepherds and their sheep are constantly on display in the New Testament as well as the Old, it has seemed to me a diminution and a substantial cheapening of our faith to suppose that the best image of the relation of God to humankind is that of a caregiver to so dumb, brainless, clueless breed of animals as sheep. The worst thing that sheep seem to be able to do is to go wandering into the relatively harmless edges of pasture land. They do not make promises that they fail to keep. They do not conspire against their fellow sheep or their Creator. They are not guilty of any heinous crimes. They are docile, defenseless, undangerous creatures whose coats are shorn regularly to provide material for human clothing, and their young are butchered to provide tasteful lamb stews." Many commentators of this beautiful passage note that the foolish behavior of sheep is not much different than nations building vast empires. And I suppose that this is the most gripping lesson. Of course, the writer is correct. At the level of nations anyway, we often act like foolish sheep. The evidence for that is all around. But I think that it is in the way we are different from sheep, as the writer clearly attests, particularly in our capacity to hurt ourselves and each other, that causes us to long for good shepherds who embody the love of Christ to come into our lives. Jesus promised, "I am the good shepherd, and I lay down my life for my sheep." More than anything, I think this is Jesus' promise of hope. He will not abandon us, when the thief or the wolf threatens. He will not turn his back on us when we fail to meet our own expectations. He will not desert us when we are lost and have lost sight of the light. He knows us, every single one of us, and He calls us continuously so that we can hear His voice and know that He is there. And He invites all of us into His fold, just the way we are. With this hope and assurance, we can be emboldened to face whatever life has in store, and perhaps more importantly, to embody the love of Jesus as we too become shepherds, Christ shepherds in the world. Who do you know that might need a good shepherd today? Amen.